Hello, welcome back to the third episode of Untested Arcana. This is the show where I take popular characters from film, television, video games, and use them to design tabletop RPG content. For now, I'm just doing homebrew for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I'm also making all of them straight in D&D Beyond so people can play them after they watch the video. If you're watching this around the time that it's posted, you know that there's a lot of stuff going on in the homebrew world, and specifically around the, let's say, morality of using D&D Beyond. I wasn't sure if I was going to make another video after last week, but I think the most recent update has been encouraging, and I'm kind of going to hope for the best here, and I'm going to keep making videos. You know, on a personal level, I was really excited to have a new creative project this year, and I was kind of bummed that it looked like it was going to fall apart, immediately after I started through no fault of my own. So I'm willing to keep this going for a little while, and while I'm getting barely any views and don't really have any subscribers, I don't think it's such a big deal for me to be making this stuff. If anything, it'll be a learning experience, and if I've got to pivot to another system or another platform, then I will. But enough of that, let's move into the actual content of today's episode. Last week, amidst all the bad news, there was also some good news, which was that one of my favorite anime came back on the air, which was Bofuri. If you haven't seen it, it's a great show, very fun, relaxing, low stakes, but with shockingly good action direction and animation, and also just this really charming character at the center of it, Maple, who has stumbled her way into being so overpowered that the developers of the game have to balance around her. She's done this by concentrating entirely on defense and becoming essentially invincible. And I think that is a great archetype that could be explored in Dungeons & Dragons. So I know in the past two videos, it's been sort of a live development process. I've just been cutting through these live streams where I make everything up on the spot. This time I've made it ahead of time. This is an experiment. If this is harder to make, or frankly isn't as good of a video, I might go back to the live stream thing. So the question becomes, if we want to make someone like Maple, how are we going to do that? What can Maple do? The issue is that Maple is an anime character. She's an anime protagonist. She can do everything. She is incredibly overpowered. I'm just going to throw up on the screen all of her major powers just from Season 1. I think if we're going to make a balanced, relatively balanced subclass for Maple, we need to really sort out which of these things we can do and which of these things we can't do, or at least don't have to do. But first, I want to do the thing I do every episode where we talk about class, and this one is going to be super fast. We don't need to make a tier list. We don't need to go through everything. I'm just going to put all the classes up on the screen. I'm going to tell you this. Maple has to have shield proficiency and heavy armor, which takes us from 13 classes to 3. Cleric, Fighter, Paladin. I know other classes could potentially be given heavy armor as a subclass feature, but I want level 1 heavy armor. And then from here, the choice is easy. Clerics have a D8 hit die. If we're going to make a character with impossible amounts of HP, D8's not going to cut it, so Cleric's gone. Fighter doesn't naturally have any magic, and while I guess we could make a third caster like Eldritch Knight, I don't know why we would when Paladin is sitting right there, already a half caster with a D10 hit die. So Maple is a Paladin. I don't think anyone would take issue with that. Let's go back to the list of powers that I put up. I think it's important when you're making homebrew that you recognize that some things can already be done by the system. In this case, there are powers on this list that I don't think we need to build into the subclass. I think that just being a Paladin and building your character in a specific way can accomplish them. So right off the bat, having a ton of HP and AC, you can kind of just do that. You can play as a dwarf. You can wear heavy armor. You can take the tough feat. Now, we're still going to try and bump some of this up with the subclass, but it's not going to be our main focus. One of her most iconic powers, Devour, honestly, that's just a bunch of spells. Any banishing spells will work. Dispel magic, counterspell, that stuff's already in the game. Then there's Syrup. She has a giant turtle familiar who can fly and shoot lasers. Sounds pretty unreasonable. Seems like something maybe we'd have to design. But also, Paladins get Summon Celestial, and the Celestial can shoot a radiant attack. That's covered. One of her sort of big endgame powers in Season 1 is this angel form that prevents people around her from taking damage. And yeah, that seems really powerful. And like, oh, I guess that's got to be our capstone. But also, the spell Circle of Power exists. And that does most of what the angel form does, so I'm also not going to deal with that. Now, there's probably one thing on this list that I don't think we're going to be able to replicate at all, and that's the machine god form. It's too incongruous with the rest of her powers. This one is probably the only one on this list that we're kind of not going to be able to do. So let's look at what's left. Obviously, we talked about boosting AC and HP. We talked about making sure that the spells for Devour are in the subclass. But there are a couple of big things that I didn't talk about. There's one of her iconic moves, which is Cover Move, where she instantly teleports in front of her allies to protect them from harm. That's something we can make. That's something that's not well replicated by even like a Misty Step, because it's not a reaction. So a reaction teleport protection move, that's something we can do. But the real important one is the Hydra powers. And as you'll see as we go along, that's going to be our main theme. Being a poisonous survivor, that's Maple. That stuff's actually going to be our central focus. And then, weirdly, the atrocity thing where she turns into a horrible demon, I'm going to sneak that in. You'll see. If you look at this list now, that's not that hard. We're making a poison paladin who can pop up wherever they're needed to protect their allies, and, can maybe occasionally transform into a horrible monster. That's a coherent power set, I think. So let me talk about what I was thinking as I built this subclass. I knew that I wanted the Hydra to be the central element. This idea of regeneration, of being unkillable, and then of also having this poison component, which I know that Hydras in D&D don't have poison. We're going to kind of ignore that. But yeah, having Hydra as the central element gave me a really good thematic starting place. And so here is the flavor text that I wrote to accompany this oath. The oath of the Hydra is taken by paladins who value survival above all else. Their oath does not dedicate them to an ideological cause, but instead empowers them to defend their own principles against all attacks. Some outsiders view this oath as selfish, one inspired by a many-mouthed beast of legendary greed. And while this may be true of some paladins, many others use the powers granted to them as a way to guarantee the survival of their allies, of their communities, or even of entire nations. After all, what good is a long life if you have no one to share it with? So yeah, you can see what I'm kind of going for. I want it to be possible for you to make Maple someone who is happy and cheery and loves her friends. But also, if you just want to make a horrible, toxic monster, that's available to you. Another fun thing about making paladin oaths is that they all list their tenets in their flavor text, so I got to write some for this, which I'll read now. The tenets of the Oath of the Hydra remind a paladin that the winner of any conflict is the last one standing. Bide your time. Even small strikes can defeat great foes, if only you have the patience. Harden your scales. Against unlimited endurance, all arsenals run dry. One falls, two rise. If you are ever defeated, return stronger and flanked by allies. So normally the first feature in a Paladin Oath is the spell list, but I'm actually going to skip that for now. I think that it'll be more interesting to talk about it after we've seen the rest of the features, so we can talk about how the spells complement those features. Besides spells, the first feature that you get as a Paladin are 2 channel divinities. Just as an aside, I find that this makes it a little difficult to make Paladin subclasses because they don't get a static feature really until 15th level. So you have to be really intentional with how you make this first couple of features, the spell list and channel divinity, because you don't have a lot to work with to give them an identity. So for the Oath of the Hydra, I've chosen 2 channel divinities. The first is Corrosive Venom, and the second is Serpent's Hiss. Corrosive Venom reads, you can use your channel divinity to douse an enemy with deadly poison. As an action, you force a creature of your choice that you can see within 15 feet of you to make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, the creature is drenched in Hydra Venom for 1 minute, or until it uses its action to wipe it off. While it is covered in venom, it takes poison damage equal to your paladin level at the beginning of each of its turns. Weirdly, this is just Acid Splash. This is just an Acid Splash that does poison damage that you can use once per short rest. I think what's important about this is that D&D does not have recurring damage a lot, because that's tough to do on tabletop. Again, in a video game where the computer can keep track of lots of little things, yeah, having poison that stacks over time makes perfect sense. But on a tabletop game where you have to remember it, or the DM has to remember it, it can get a little annoying to track sort of, at the beginning of their turn, they take this damage. And there is some of it in the game, but there's not a ton. And so by making this a channel divinity, I let you have that sort of poison over time thing without it becoming overwhelming, because you can't do it more than once, and you can't do it to more than one creature. But to make up for that limit, it's quite powerful. I mean, your paladin level in damage for a whole minute, assuming they don't wipe it off, that's a lot. When you start the game, it's not that much. It's 3 damage each turn, which is a pretty small amount. But by 20th level, if you do this to a boss creature, that's 20 damage at the start of each of its turns. If they don't wipe it off, that will eventually do 200 damage, and you don't need to concentrate on it. So I feel like the fact that it scales with paladin level makes up for the fact that, yeah, at 20th level it's super powerful, but everything at 20th level is super powerful. Whereas at 4th level, it's kind of powerful, I guess. Now, normally paladins, when they get 2 channel divinities, they get one that hurts and one that doesn't. Sometimes they don't even get one that hurts. So the second one is Serpent's Hiss, and it just says, you can use your channel divinity to draw the ire of those around you. As an action, you present your holy symbol and force each hostile creature within 60 feet of you to make an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, a creature regards you as an imminent threat for 1 minute. Creatures that cannot be charmed are immune to this effect. This one is interesting. There are other paladins that compel people to fight them, and they do so often in a more mechanically severe way by not allowing a creature to walk away from you, by giving them disadvantage to attack anyone else. And I think that's fine, but I really want to be able to control a crowd in this instance. And so I can't make those kind of mechanical demands. I think that just makes it way too powerful. Whereas having them perceive you as very threatening, and this is important. There are spells that charm creatures and then just insert some thoughts. I'm specifically thinking of Charm Person, which says the charmed creature regards you as a friendly acquaintance. I really like a spell like that is sort of up to the DM to decide what that means. But in this case, what it means is everyone on the battlefield turns and goes, that paladin is the problem. We need to deal with that paladin. It doesn't demand that they attack you. Doesn't mean they can't run away from you. But it does mean that you are going to draw focus from other people. And I think that a good cooperative DM who wants everyone to have a good time would abide by this. They're not going to make everyone only attack the paladin forever. But it might shift the focus of the enemies a little bit, enough to take heat off other characters. So yeah, I think it's a fun, balanced way to just make sure that this person is getting the opportunity to tank. This is a big thing in not only tabletop, but just game design in general. If someone's trying to play to a fantasy, you should give them more opportunities to play to it. And if the fantasy of this is having impossibly high AC and having everything clank off your armor, well, more attacks directed at you, that would give you more opportunities to feel invincible. The next thing that paladins get is, at 7th level, they get an aura. And with a few exceptions, this is some effect that surrounds you at first in a 10-foot sphere, and then eventually in a 30-foot sphere. These effects range from, I think, totally pointless and lame, all the way to some, specifically Oath of the Ancients, that I feel is outrageous. I mean, resistance to spell damage for everyone within 30 feet is wild. So when I was thinking about what to do for this, I realized that this was the perfect opportunity for Cover Move. Now, Cover Move in the show, she can use infinitely, but giving someone an infinite teleport over vast distances is just not reasonable. But I think giving someone an infinite reaction teleport within a certain radius under very specific circumstances maybe isn't so bad. So that's what I've done here. Aura of Interception. Starting at 7th level, you can intercept danger in the blink of an eye. Whenever a creature you can see is the target of an attack, you can use your reaction to teleport to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of the creature. If you teleport to a space that places you between the creature and its attacker, you become the target of the attack instead. If you have another ability that uses your reaction, such as a spell or fighting style, you can activate that ability as part of this reaction. At 18th level, the range of this aura increases to 30 feet. It's kind of a lot in there, but I want to talk about a couple small parts of it. One is that I've restricted it to just attacks. Now, I know that in the show, she jumps in front of fireballs, which is not an attack, that's a saving throw. I think that if I had to write conditions for, you can jump in front of attacks, or if an ally is making a saving throw, but realistically, I'd probably have to restrict it to just dexterity saves, because the other ones don't make as much sense for jumping out in front. So I think that just jumping out for attacks makes sense. Should happen a decent amount. It's mostly going to happen on ranged attacks because you'll be able to place yourself between your ally and the attacker. And I think that kind of matches with how it gets used. But if you do want to interrupt a melee attack, I've added this second part where if you have another reaction, you can use it as part of this. Not you get 2 reactions. We're not doing that. But if you have like the protection fighting style, and you can't place yourself between an attacker and an ally because it's a melee attack, you can still pop next to them and activate protection fighting style or interception fighting style. Also, if you're using this to actually get in front of a ranged attack, well, then you can also activate shield and make it so that it absolutely doesn't hit you. And I think that, again, these are first drafts. If in testing this meant that no one in your party ever took damage, well, then I guess we'll have to make it weaker. But you still only get 1 reaction per round. You cannot protect an entire party. Then you go to 15th level. Paladins don't get a lot of subclass features. It's one of the things I don't love about the class in terms of designing for them. But at 15th level, you get the Paladin's only static feature. Something that has no rules. It's not an aura, they're not channel divinities, it's not the Capstone transformation. You just make it whatever you want. And so I realized this character shouldn't rely too much on attacking. This is a defensive archetype. And because of that, it means I want them to cast more spells. And being a half-caster gets in the way of that. You just don't have that many spell slots. So I've stolen something from divination wizards that I really like, and I've called it Mystic Regeneration. By 15th level, your magic is bolstered by the Hydra's Unbreakable Spirit. When you cast an abjuration spell of 2nd level or higher using a spell slot, you regain 1 expended spell slot. The slot you regain must be of a level lower than the spell you cast and can't be higher than 3rd level. So yeah, this lets you cast more, but it encourages you as much as possible to cast abjuration spells. Specifically, it lets you cast shield a lot, because every time you cast an abjuration spell on your turn, you're regaining a low-level spell slot. It's not infinite. I'm not giving you infinite shield. I'm not giving you wizard spell mastery that lets you just have a permanent +5 to your AC, as much as I wish I could. But I am encouraging you to cast abjuration spells, more powerful, bigger abjuration spells, so that you have more opportunities to cast the low-level ones, specifically shield, which I realize I haven't mentioned. Shield's gonna be on the spell list. I think that was probably obvious. Now, as I'm assuming everyone knows, Paladins get a 20th level Oath feature, which is always some sort of massive, powerful transformation. And because it's 20th level, there's really no way to make it unbalanced. Everything in D&D, every character, is wildly, unbelievably powerful at 20th level. So I honestly don't even think about balance when I'm making a Paladin Capstone. I want to make sure it doesn't seem stupidly powerful, doesn't sort of trivialize everything else at the table, but it can be pretty strong. So here's what I've got. Hydra Incarnate. At 20th level, your enemies must face the full might of your Serpentine Idol. As an action, you can turn into a Hydra as if transformed by the spell True Polymorph. This form has the game statistics of an ancient green dragon, but with the following additional features. Multiple heads. The Hydra has 3 heads. Whenever the Hydra takes 50 or more damage in a single turn, one of its heads dies. If all its heads die, the Hydra immediately drops to 0 hit points. Regeneration. At the end of its turn, it grows 2 heads for each of its heads that died since its last turn, up to a maximum of 5 heads. The Hydra regains 10 hit points for each head regrown in this way. Reactive heads. For each head the Hydra has beyond 1, it gets an extra reaction that can be used only for opportunity attacks. This transformation lasts for 10 minutes or until you dismiss it as an action. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. So yeah, that's a lot. That's ridiculous. An Ancient Green Dragon is a CR 22 creature, which I would probably bump up given the fact that I'm letting it regenerate a little hit points and get extra opportunity attacks. So maybe CR 23, 24. Seems ridiculous, sure. Except for the fact that most 9th level spellcasters can true polymorph into a CR 20 creature for an hour. So what? So you can do a CR 24 for 10 minutes every day. That's not that wild. You don't have 8th, 7th, 6th level spells to back it up. I think a CR 22 creature, totally reasonable. The Ancient Green Dragon was the perfect stat block. It does a ton of poison damage, it's big, it's terrifying, but I needed that Hydra stuff. So I just went and took the sort of important parts of the Hydra stat block, which is way lower CR, it's like 10 or 12 or something, and I just kind of ported them over. Again, is this reasonable? I don't know. I would say playtest it, but nobody plays 20th level D&D. And the fun thing here, the little bonus, is this is also how you do atrocity. Just kind of ignore the poison part and sometimes pretend you're turning into an atrocity, and sometimes pretend it's when she summons that huge purple Hydra monster. It's kind of both, it's kind of neither, but I think it absolutely represents the pinnacle of this archetype. You know, up to this point, you are an avatar of invincibility, of poison, of inevitability. And at 20th level, you're not even human anymore. You can just turn into a giant, terrifying, unkillable monster. Oh, right. The spells. I almost stopped recording. Right, spells. Cool. Paladins, like clerics, get 2 additional spells per level. They can be pre-existing paladin spells because you do get the benefit of them being always prepared. But generally, you try to give them some spells from outside their list as a bit of an identity maker. First level spells are Grease and Shield. I think Shield is obvious. I mean, the 15th level feature is designed specifically to encourage the use of Shield. We talked about that. And I think Grease is just a fun little first level spell, and I couldn't really find anything else that I liked. I also put Poison Spray on here as a cantrip. There aren't really rules that say you can't do that. You know, like Swarmkeeper is a half-caster that gets a cantrip. To me, what's important is A, obviously does poison damage, but B, gives you a cantrip, a relatively weak cantrip that can fill in for your generic free action on a turn when you don't have anything else to do. Second level spells, I put Hold Person here specifically because she does have this ability Paralyzing Shout that you see in a few episodes, and I think it's excusable. And then Protection from Poison. Again, an abjuration spell, and something that obviously makes a ton of thematic sense. Third level spells, Counterspell, Abjuration. Also, that's how you do Devour. And then Stinking Cloud, which to me is like the step up from Poison Spray or from Grease. It's just that kind of like spreading poison. At 4th level, Banishment. It's already a paladin spell, but I want to make sure you have it. It's Abjuration, it's high level, and again, that's how you're doing Devour. And then Resilient Sphere, which weirdly isn't Abjuration, but there's a couple of bits where Maple will make like a ball of poison to roll around in, and I just felt like, you know, it thematically works, and importantly, it lets you recreate a very specific thing from the show. And then 5th level, I've put Cloud Kill and Greater Restoration. Now, Greater Restoration, high-level Abjuration spell, and then Cloud Kill is basically the best poison damage thing I can put on a paladin, besides, of course, the Channel Divinity I already gave you. And so, yeah, you can see I'm going to mark it out here. This gives you an Abjuration spell at all the high levels so that you can use those spells to regenerate low-level spell slots to cast Shield. And then everything else is just there to kind of support the playstyle and to support the theme of poison damage and area control and just general oppressive invincibility. I mean, that's the kind of thing that Maple does. She is bubbly and fun and friendly and also existentially terrifying to face on the battlefield. So that's it. I'm not going to go through the process of building this on D&D Beyond in this video. I'm trying stuff out. If against all odds you are watching this and you've watched the others and you prefer this or prefer the other way, I guess leave a comment. Let me know what's better. And yeah, check the link in the description to get this on D&D Beyond right now. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you in a week. Thanks for watching. See ya.